Hello everyone and welcome to 2024. I have a brand new crochet along calendar blanket for us to work on all year long. Welcome to January's square. As you can see, we are doing filet crochet for this 2024 crochet along calendar blanket. For the month of January, we are going to create this snowflake pattern. You can use any type of yarn that you want to use throughout the year, and the hook size that I am using is a 4.5 millimeter crochet hook and a 4-weight just acrylic yarn because this is going to be a blanket. So if you change up your yarn size from a 4-weight, your squares may measure just a little bit differently than mine. At the end of this video and in the description box below, I will give measurements for this entire square so you have those to see how your square is measuring up to the one in this tutorial. If you are not familiar with how to filet crochet and read a filet crochet graph, please check out my how-to video on how to filet crochet, and that will give you the overall basics on how to read a graph and how to filet crochet so you can be more comfortable doing this blanket project with us. There are also tons of other helpful videos out there on YouTube to check out for filet crochet if you need a little bit of a refresher or a crash course in filet crochet. Basically, filet crochet is done in double crochet stitches and chain spaces like these to create from a graph a piece of fabric that has an image on it. Traditionally, filet crochet was done with a very fine weight crochet thread and a small steel hook to create very intricate designs on fabrics. However, for this blanket, I am just going to be using a 4-weight yarn and the 4.5 millimeter crochet hook to get a square that is a little bit bigger so I can turn all 12 squares into a nice blanket. For our squares, every month will be the same stitch count going across and the same number of rows going up. Nothing changes except for the graph that we are using. Each square will have 46 total stitches running across. So your foundation chain needs to be 48 stitches. We're going to do 45 plus 3 for the first double crochet on that end, and then a double crochet all the way back in that foundation chain. So let's jump right into January's tutorial for this snowflake. I am going to be using blue for January. You can use any color that you want. You can use a different color for each month. You could use variegated, self-striping yarn for every month. However you want to create your filet crochet blanket. We're going to start with a slip knot, chain 45. I have my 45 chains to start. I'm going to chain those additional 3 chains as my double crochet, and in the 4th chain away from the hook, so 1, 2, 3, 4, we're going to work that double crochet. And now you're going to want to work a double crochet into every stitch all the way back down your foundation chain. At the end of this first row, you should have 46 total double crochets, including that first chain here. Once you have worked your double crochets all the way down that chain, you should have 46 total double crochets. If we look at our graph, and I will put the graph up throughout this whole tutorial so you can see it, I will also at the end of this video put the graph up so you can pause the video, take a screenshot, whatever you want to do so you have that graph available to you in the future. And remember, when reading the graph, All odd rows we read right to left, and all even rows we read left to right. So row 1 was that double crochet row, we read from right to left. Row 2 we're now reading from left to right. So row 2 says we need 2 blocks and then a space. A block consists of 4 double crochets, and a space is a double crochet, a chain 2, and skip 2, and a double crochet in the next. Each square of your graph equals 4 stitches. Some are blocks if they're shaded in, and some are spaces if they're an open square. So we have 2 shaded blocks to start, so we need to create 2 blocks on our fabric here. We're going to start with a chain 3, and every row in this graph will start with a chain 3. Turn. That chain 3 counts as your first double crochet, so that is stitch number 1 in your first block. We're going to work a double crochet into the next stitch, and that is stitch number 2 of the first block. A double crochet in the next, and that is stitch number 3 in the first block, and a stitch into the next, a double crochet in that next stitch, and that is stitch number 4. When we have 4 double crochets, that equals a block. We need 1 more block according to our graph. The last double crochet that we worked counts as the first stitch in the next square. So because we're working another block, that's 1 double crochet, find the next, work a double crochet, that is 2 stitches for the second block, double crochet in the next, and into the next, and that will be 4 double crochets for block number 2. That stitch shares its end with this first square and its beginning with this square. This last double crochet that we did counts as the first double crochet in this next square that we're going to create. So the next square is a space. So we've already created that first double crochet in a space. So remember, a space is a double crochet, chain 2, skip 2, and a double crochet in the next. We already have our first double crochet, so I'm going to go ahead and chain 2, skip 2, and double crochet into the next, and we have created a space. If we look at the graph, we need 4 blocks. So I'm going to go ahead and double crochet to create 4 blocks. There's my first block. Here's the first stitch of my second block. Two blocks. Again, there's the first stitch of my next block. I'm going to create block number 3. Block number 3, first stitch of block number 4. So I'm going to double crochet in the next 3 to create the 4th block. Our graph says we need a space. Here is the first stitch of that space. Going to chain 2, skip 2, and double crochet in the next. I need 4 more blocks, so I'm going to double crochet. I already have that first stitch there of the next block, so I've got 2 stitches, 3, and 4. Block 1, first stitch of block 2, 2 blocks, three blocks. That stitch right there counts as the first of the next block. Let's finish our 4th block. This stitch right here counts as the first stitch of our next square, which is a space. So I'm going to chain 2, skip 2, double crochet into the next. And the graph says we are finished with 2 blocks. So I've got that first stitch. I'm going to just double crochet into every stitch all the way back, making sure that it equals 2 blocks. So there's block number 1. I have 3 stitches left, including this turning chain. And remember that chain, that stitch counts up here. So that's 1 stitch, 2, 3, and into the top of that turning chain is 4. 2 blocks on the end. So that is row 2. I'm going to work one more row with you on camera. Let's look at row number 3. So we're reading from right to left. We start with a block. We're going to chain 3, turn our work. Every row starts with a chain 3 and turn. We need 1 block. There is the first double crochet stitch of block 1. So work a double crochet in the next 3. There is block 1. Now we need 2 spaces. So here is the first double crochet of our first space. Chain 2, skip 2, 1, 2, and into the next stitch work a double crochet. We need another space. Here is the first stitch of space number 2, chain 2, skip those 2 chains, those count as stitches, and work a double crochet into the next. We now need 3 blocks, so there is our first double crochet of the first block. I'm going to work 3 total blocks. There's 1 block. There's 2 blocks. 1 more block. So double crochet in the next 3. And now we have our 3 blocks. The graph says we need a space and a block and a space. So to create our space, we already have our stitch right here. I'm going to chain 2, skip 2, double crochet in the next. And there's our space. Now we need to work over this block here, and we're working a block. So we already have our double crochet there. We need to work into these 2 chain stitches. Don't work around them. Try to get into the actual stitches to create your block. And there is our block over that space. We now need a space. So we've got our first stitch right here, chain 2, skip 2, and double crochet into the next. I'm going to work the 3 blocks, as the graph says. Block 1, block number 2, and block number 3. Looking at the graph, we need 2 spaces. So I've got my first stitch of space number 1. I'm going to chain 2, skip those 2 chains right there, and double crochet into the next. We need another space. That's our first stitch of the space. So I'm going to chain 2, skip 2, and double crochet into the next. And we end this row with a block. I've got my first stitch of the last block. So I'm going to double crochet into the next 3, remembering that we need to double crochet into the turning chain since that is a stitch. And that is row 3. Once you finish working the graph, you will have a square that looks something like this. Now if you notice, you've got a wider measurement down here and not quite as wide going up on the rows. And that is because each of those blocks counts as 4 stitches, whereas the rows are just the 1 stitch, which is a double crochet. So we get almost a rectangle looking square for our blanket. So these squares for each month are not going to be perfect squares. They're going to be a little bit rectangular shaped. I hope you enjoyed this January tutorial, the snowflake filet crochet square. Thanks for watching, everyone. I'll see you in February. Bye!